1. Question 1 reads as follows. I do not think the United States would come to an end if we lost our power to declare an act of Congress void. I do think the Union would be imperiled if we could not make that declaration as to the laws of the several states. What impact has judicial review had on federalism? Is judicial review a counter-majoritarian practice? Please support your answer.
Thank you.
One more little bit, just a little bit. What limits, if any, would you place on the practice of judicial review? Ms. Heim, you want to jump in.
Thank you. The United States Constitution, as explored in Federalist 51, was founded upon a series of checks and balances, one of these being judicial review. Judicial review is an act of the judiciary branch to reevaluate the constitutionality of laws passed by the legislative branch, the federal government, as well as state governments. Although not explicitly stated in the Constitution, judicial review has been expanded and constricted the rights of individuals as well as rights given to the state and the federal governments.
Power of judicial review, established in Marbury v. Madison, was later expanded under the Doctrine of Incorporation, established in Chaplinsky v. New Hampshire. This ruling affects federalism in that this check was placed not only on federal legislation, but also on state legislation. Judicial review has been essential to the progression and evolution of American federalism. This is demonstrated in cases such as Plessy v. Ferguson and Brown v. Board of Education. Without judicial review, the practice of segregation in southern states might have lasted longer.
Although the American people do not possess a direct vote in the selection of Supreme Court justices, we do not believe that judicial review is a counter-majoritarian practice. Supreme Court justices are not swayed by the opinions or votes of the American people, nor should they be. This is not the case for the legislative branch. Many times, their legislation is influenced by the desires of their voters. Therefore, the laws passed all contain a certain amount of bias.
Judicial review helps to limit this bias by keeping to the Constitution. Furthermore, democracy is still secured through the constitutional process of the nomination and approval of Supreme Court justices. In the end, we the people elect the President and the Senate to carry out this process.
As it is with all federal capabilities, limits must be placed to ensure equal sharing of power. One limit we would consider placing on judicial review is in the form of an amendment. We believe that it would be beneficial to return to the 60-vote minimum in the Senate to approve a Supreme Court justice nominee in order to further limit the politicization of the Supreme Court. Recently, the appointment of a justice has only required 51 votes, barely a majority, and does not accurately reflect the approval of the American people.
For example, upon the appointment of Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett, there was a Republican president and a Republican majority leader in the Senate. Since only 51 votes were required and Republicans controlled the Senate, right-leaning Justice Barrett easily joined the ranks of one of the 9 Supreme Court justices. We believe that by increasing the vote to 60 senators, it would reduce the political bias of the court and embrace the importance of these lifetime appointments. This limitation should guarantee more essential justices that should help limit political bias in the court.
Throughout the history of America, the sharing of powers between state and federal governments has been reshaped and reevaluated. The power of judicial review has helped to balance powers and maintain stability in our diverse republic through the protection and preservation of rights.
Judicial review has helped secure liberties for majorities and minorities alike. While still keeping to our constitutional roots and values, we the people believe that judicial review has enabled America to evolve and grow while still staying true to our unalienable rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness.
Cool. Well, thank you, folks. And under the time limit, very nicely done there. Look, you folks are presenting an argument here about judicial review, about being important. And yet I thought in a political democracy like ours that political majorities set public policy. And yet you seem to think that 9 unelected, unaccountable people in robes in Washington should be able to stop political majorities from actually carrying out their will. Help me understand that friction a little bit more, eh?
So I think that really this is a definition issue. I think when we define majoritarian, a lot of the times people do think it is from the political parties and it's from an aspect of what the political environment is at that moment in time. However, if we go back to when the Constitution was ratified in the 1800s, when the majority vote was the Constitution, when it was agreed upon by the Federalists and Anti-Federalists alike. This was the original majoritarian decision of the Constitutional Convention. And I think that this is kind of like Odysseus and the sirens in that story when Odysseus told his men, tie me to the post. The Constitution is the thing that is tying us to the post in terms of this analogy. If we had gone back and asked Odysseus's men, do you want to go follow the sirens? They probably would have said yes, because this is what's compelling them. That would be a majority decision. However, the Constitution is the majoritarian decision that the Supreme Court should be following. It's the decision that has been made by a group of men at the beginning of our nation. It's the guidelines we have set. And the Supreme Court is kind of a policing measure to make sure, like, oh, wait, you stepped over the line. This is how the Constitution says that what you've done and what you've stepped over, how you've gone away from the Constitution. I think it's one of the reasons the Constitution is so difficult and it's such a long, arduous process to amend, because this has to be a majoritarian document. It has to be a document that the whole country agrees on, because this is what the Supreme Court is interpreting. And if they're doing their job, they will stick to it and they will interpret it as it was intended.
Yeah, but if they don't like it, there's just 9 of them. So if they don't like what the majority likes, their decisions hold. Isn't that right? So
Well,
they
I
can
think
frustrate.
it is seen as very frustrating because they aren't elected by us. We don't elect these people; they're placed. However, it's just a form of trust you have to put in your government. You have to have this inkling of trust that they're gonna keep our rights in mind and that they're gonna evaluate the Constitution.
Okay.
So I want to go back to the Odysseus analogy a bit. I mean, do you think we should be collectively tied to a post that was centuries before any of us came along, with attitudes about key issues facing society that are stuck back in the late 18th century?
We do have the amendment process. You can amend the Constitution. We've seen this for issues such as the 18th and the 21st Amendment, when the 18th set the prohibition laws and the 21st repealed that. I'm sure that when speaking of Brown versus Board of Education, it was probably considered a counter-majoritarian decision at that point. However, we had the 14th Amendment. We had added that amendment. We, the people, had decided upon this amendment, and we had placed it in our Constitution to instruct the court on how to make their decisions.
As time goes along, people tend to change and thoughts tends to change. And that's why we have enabled ourselves in our government to allow for the change of our amendments and the evolution of the people with the government. And that is where the people say and the people's will to and right to vote on such things and elect people that they feel should be in to say what they feel.
Also, take, for example, the Doctrine of Incorporation. With the passage of this doctrine in the 14th Amendment, it has really given people back their rights. In a court case, Adamson v. California, this was when Adamson wanted his Fifth Amendment right. He did not want to incriminate himself in court because of past actions that may make the jury lean a certain way against his current standings. And it was found that the Fifth Amendment was not applicable because it was not applicable to the states. However, almost mirror case in Griffin v. California, when it was the same case, he didn't want to incriminate himself. However, again, it was found with the Doctrine of Incorporation that he had the right to his Fifth Amendment rights, and the Bill of Rights was incorporated into their decision.
Speaking of the Doctrine of Incorporation, the Doctrine of Incorporation allows for the evolution and change for the states and the federal government to apply laws that are somewhat necessary and needed for certain people, and to be allow the people to get basically what they need and want. So one example of that would be Obergefell v. Hodges, where the LGBTQ community the states could deny them the right of their marital license. And with the Obergefell v. Hodges court case, it was saying that states must allow them to get their marital license, and which is something that I feel everyone should have the ability to have and the right to get it.
Another example relating to Caleb's about marriage and things, a court case is Loving versus Virginia. This made it okay for people that weren't of the same rights to get married. There was a huge issue with it, but during the court case, Justice Earl Warren said, under our Constitution, like the freedom to marry or not to marry a person of another race resides within the individual, and this cannot infringe on that or interfere with it. And this relates to the pursuit of happiness and the inalienable rights that we all have, no matter what.
So are you giving the Supreme Court credit for being able to change with the times? Or do you think that they should be limited so that once they get really old, older than me, once they get really old, they should not be able to serve anymore? How do you feel about term limits for Supreme Court justices?
So again, in the Federalist Papers, such as Federalist 51 or Federalist 78, they are constantly, the tenure issue is constantly debated as tenure under good behavior. This is tenure, this is a tenure for life. However, there have been questions that have arisen because of the term limit. And is this person suitable to continue? I think that as long as the judge is mentally and physically capable to continue on and continue to reevaluate and interpret the Constitution, and as long as we the people continue to have the right to amend the Constitution, then the judges should have their tenure for life.
Okay, we're out of time. We could talk about this for another half hour, but that's okay. Breathe, okay? You did fine. This is a weird, hard question. What I mean by weird is that these are just tough concepts. The concept of judicial review, of what it is, how does it work, against whom, in what way, federalism and the balance between state, federal power over time and space, and then the whole counter-majoritarian. Is the Supreme Court really a balance of power, or is it a defense of minorities, particularly racial minorities, but not solely minorities, versus a fear of majority tyranny? And that's what I was asking about in my first question. On the other hand, you guys handled it very nicely. You clearly struggled with these big ideas and back and forth. Just as Odysseus struggled to listen to the sirens as he sailed by. I don't know, I have to keep going back to Homer, which is a good thing to do. But so I really appreciate your efforts. I thought you did a nice job.
Thank you.
Me too. I thought it was good. You had you learned some cases. You applied some of the cases correctly. I think you could have gone a little bit more in depth, but I thought the mentioning the ones you did with regard to how judicial review applied during the societal problems we were having in the 50s and 60s. I thought you hit it when you talked about, and then in the 1800s when you were talking about Plessy v. Ferguson, but then when you brought it forward to Brown versus Board, I think you need to continue to look. I loved that you talked about Griffin v. California, and that you talked about incorporation and all that. I just liked how you got that and all. Just keep absorbing and paying attention. But I thought overall it was a good job.
I think y'all showed a lot of grace in the way in which you dealt with questions, which were really tough questions, as Tom said. And I think you I will be curious whether in 15 or 20 years you have as much faith in the amendment process as you do at the time at this point. I appreciate your commitment to these ideals, but as somebody who's been around a little bit longer, it takes a lot of hard work to get an amendment done, even ones that seem pretty intuitive at that point in time. So that would be my one challenge, and I would urge you to think back in a couple of decades if you still agree with where you are today. But I appreciate your commitment to those ideals.
And it's okay to change your mind. So not to worry. So, but well done, folks. Glad we could spend some time here this afternoon. Good luck to you with the rest of the day. And like I said, keep breathing. It's okay.
I'm
Thank
looking,
you.
every single
Thank
one
you.
of you are doing 2 units. I don't know how in the world you're managing that. That's great. It's really impressive.
They're great.